out of the 18th century.
So am I. We're all getting there. All right, so here's what we need.
Right.
This will need to be removed when. Hold on.
Yeah.
I liked what you did.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Good. The colour was nice.
The color is nice, but move the blue box down below. It's
There's a blue box
highlighting
left
it.
on
It's
it.
highlighting.
I've done that
it.
already.
You did it already. Okay, good.
Catch up.
Oh, come now. Okay, so this will get removed after Spring sings.
Yeah.
And what we want to do is bring the table back out here. No glasses.
The little table, yeah.
The little table. We're going to put the microphones on it. And do we have a little flower arrangement of some sort or a plant or something that we could put on this table? Because I think our candle holder is too big. If not, I'll go to the PLR and steal the one that they have there, which
I
is
think that's a grand idea. I could just go do that straight
okay.
away.
Why don't you
And I'll move
steal the
table
one
over
for?
onto this side where we're going to take the microphone stand.
Yes. So if we can get the PLR, that would be great.
Are we going with the over-ear mics?
No, they're going to
Okay.
just use these handhelds. Okay. So once Spring speaks, we remove this, put the table down with the.
Leave it on that through
Leave
the
it
thing.
on through the thing to the
And
very end
then
towards
the end of the tea
tea break.
breaks.
Well, right when we send people off to tea break, we'll put it up.
Put it
so
up.
it'll stay up through tea break.
Yeah.
We'll rearrange. And oh my
do you
God,
know
I see
anything
that
about-
Kiva has no slides, so we
No slides.
can
So during the tea break, I can turn it off and go do what I want.
exactly,
And
exactly.
then that's me for the day.
And then that's you for the day
Till tomorrow morning.
till tomorrow morning.
Ach so, maybe 4. Setzen wir uns doch darunter, oder?
Hiya. Are we doing
Powerful and then just go.
Zambia, right? That's what you were talking about. 70 languages, weren't you? Yeah. Are you involved in farming and agriculture work in Zambia? Yes. What do? Do you train for farming? really successful.
Yes, we are. Are they kind of for it? Sorry, I'll let you through. Hi. Oh, I'll sit here for a second. Don't worry, if you want
So, welcome everyone. And we would love you to move closer. We would love you to move so close that we actually fill the chairs here in the circle first. So please come and fill these chairs and then come and fill the bottom rows. You're invited, we're all invited to become more intimate. Where is the table? Can you just sit next to me?
Yeah.
It was just, this was on the table. On that show, yeah. This way nobody will sit there side. I just. Hey, maybe you can also speak here. So again, please move down, come and sit in the inner circle. And we've been wanting to welcome the live stream and the hubs all day. And they've been with us so patiently and fully and very alive. There's big hubs of people in different places in the world tuning into the energy of what is happening here, having their own journey while we're having our journey. And around 400 people signed up to the live stream as well, being with us. So let's just take a moment to presence them and bring them here into our awareness, awakening into consciousness, so also the consciousness that our community is in that way bigger than it seems. Yeah, and welcome. Maybe we can, do they see us waving if we all wave to the camera for a moment? Hello, guys. Really happy to have you with us. Ah, can you feel the happiness coming back? I can feel it. That was nice. Great. We are going to have this afternoon a special sharing space. And today, one of the topics of awakening to consciousness keeps being this deepening into listening to the other voices, deepening into listening to other cultural spaces, deepening into actually listening to the messages that have been given again and again and again and have not been listened to. So that's also what we're here to do today. And we're going to start by listening to a different culture. And there were a few cultures this morning that weren't also invited to step up specifically. You know, we said we wouldn't be able to remember everyone. So, special welcome to the Fertile Crescent. Special welcome to China. And we will start with a song from China, from Spring.
大家好，你好。So when I got here, Haru, my brother Haru, he's not here, and Harold were one of the first few people I talked with. And the first thing he said to me, he opened his arm and said to me, Chinese people are also indigenous people. So I'm here to bring the song about our mother river, Yangtze River, that has been flowing for thousands of years and nourished our culture and also has been suffering right now. I'm singing for the river and the river's people. 朝辞白堤彩云间，千里江陵，一日还，两岸猿声啼不住，轻舟已过万重山。朝辞白堤彩云间，千里江陵一日还，两岸猿声啼不住，轻舟已过万重山。
Thank you so much, Spring. And I think we could feel the vastness of China and the breadth and length of the Yangtze River as you sang. Thank you. Beautiful. Yeah, so this afternoon we're going to have some space to simply listen to what is alive in us. And we're going to be using this format which has different entrances that we can enter through. And I'll explain just a little bit more about that in a moment. But I think to start us off, we can just turn to a neighbor for a few minutes. So find somebody, if you like, somebody who you know very well who's sitting close to you. Or turn to somebody who's a surprise for you. And as on the first evening, I will gong after 2 minutes so that you can, if you like, you can really go into a deep listening and deep sharing space. You can also, if you prefer, simply have a conversation over the whole time. But just, so I'll gong after 2 minutes, and then there'll be another 2 minutes for the next person, and it's your choice how you use that time. The invitation is for one person to speak, the other person to listen, and then to swap roles. What is alive in you right now?
I would move these to the in front of the gate. You can't really see them. Or should we have them here? So we can step through We don't want people to talk about it.
Exactly. Sorry, where's my bag? Just time to swap roles.
So we're now switching just the dim listening? Yeah. Okay.
You can take the cloth off. You just want the table and the cushion, or what?
Yeah. Wow, and we can notice somehow that our group field is becoming more coherent and more sensitive. We're moving much faster in and out of spaces together. So thank you. Yeah, before we can fully start, we need the people at the back to come forward. So please do come forward. And we also need the places here to be filled. Because the witnessing here is more than witnessing. The witnessing will also hold the space for the people in the center to be able to express. And the quality of our allowing the energy that is being expressed to land in us, be in us, the quality of our listening, the quality of knowing that whatever is expressed is a part of us, this is going to infuse the possibility of expression here. And the space here at the center is like we're going to open it up into a big stage where we honor whatever is spoken here as part of our bigger journey together. And what we're most committed to is to bring authenticity into the center. And we know sometimes it's nerve-wracking. We can be nervous to speak in front of people. So then that's part of our authenticity. And this is a space for whatever is alive in us. So maybe we can, even after these conversations, just feel also what is the emotional tone also? What are the feelings that are moving through us after these days? And we're going to invite you to come into the circle and to choose a pathway. There's grief. And we have reasons for grieving. There's fear. We heard today, it's too late. There can be reasons for fear. There's optimism. We haven't heard much about the reasons for optimism, but we've heard about the commitment to optimism, especially from Christiana. The necessity for optimism. And there's a space for consciousness. And lastly, there's a wild card. A wide open space for whatever else wants to come through you. We especially, and it's very hard for me to do this, but we also want to invite people who would like to speak in other languages to come in. And we're going to invite us as a group to start with shorter contributions. 1 minute, 2 minutes, and then we can see how we go to open up the space as we deepen into sharing. And there's a microphone here, so you can come in. Also, if you're in the center, just go outside and enter through the outside. Yeah, I think that's it. Is there anything you would like to add? That's good. Okay, so let's take a moment of silence just to, and then I'll ring the bell which opens our sacred space of sharing, wherever people come together to share from the heart, sacredness enters.
Hello, I'm Sarah Brown. I'm very touched with the river song. And I would like to read my poem on water. And I would like to invite a piece of music by Ernesto Cortázar to go along with my poem. The poem is I am you, you are me. I hear your rain, I see you falling all the way from the sky and landing softly on my skin. With your all presence, I feel your strength in that very gentle being. Traveling thousands of kilometers from ice to steam to water, in your many different states, through the mountains, traveling with strong winds, big waves. How did you ever find me? I gently whisper to the raindrop on my skin. Looking at this miraculous coincidence, I have never been away from you, says water. You are me, I am you. I'm in your tears, in your sweat. I'm the one that circulates your blood to your heart. I am the water that you drink every day. Look around, says water. I'm the one that gives blue color to the sky. I'm the messenger who connects you with your sisters and brothers over the ocean. I am one, my dear. Today, I'm on your skin. Tomorrow, I will be in your lungs through the breath you take. Look around, says water. I'm connected, and I'm a connector. I can never be separated from you. I am you, you are me. I pause to this miraculous understanding that I am water, water is me. Then I look more carefully. All I see is a bit of trace of the raindrop. The sun is shining behind the clouds. I see the steam through the leaves of the tree. The trunk is perspiring with warm sunshine. I hear your water. You are on that leaf, on and in the trunk of that tree. You have a mission of giving life, continuously busy, connecting each one of us within and beyond. And I try to imagine, what is it like to be water? What is it like to be water? And I invite you to think about it. What is it like to be water? Thank you.
Right. I come from several doors. I felt I needed to follow that because where I come from is called the City of Rain. We have 200 days of rain a year, more than Great Britain, where I used to live in England. It's very, very, very green. Sometimes 100% moisture. Can you guess where I'm from? I'm from Iran. You don't know that. I'm from the city of rain. We have 200 days of rain a year. So I just felt I needed to follow from water because people don't know my place. From the Hyrcanian forest, we used to have tigers. We had lions. The last Persian lion died 5 years before I was born. My grandmother talked to me about tigers. She had memory of tigers. We still have bears. We still have wolves. We have leopards, cheetahs. I'm also very angry. I was very angry because I've been working on this thread of the Fertile Crescent for a long time. And been holding this thread with my dear friends here. And I've had friends from northern Syria, from Rojava, who we had to discontinue our conversation for the conference because they were being bombed. And we couldn't continue the conversation. So I'm angry about that. And I'm angry that we were forgotten. And that we were not known, first of all. You don't know my ecology, you don't know my landscape, you don't know my people. And then we were forgotten. And in the ceremony this morning, I was glad to see the languages and the people are coming in, and I just had a feeling Fertile Crescent is not going to be there. So I was very angry about that. So I bring my voice. I was sharing with a friend in the earlier preparation saying, if I were asked, we have so many treasures that we can share, we would like to share. We have poetry, we have music, we have dance, and there's so much from my place, from my language, from my culture that I feel needs to be part of the world, needs to be part of this conference, needs to be part of this gathering. We are here together creating a new story for climate, and we need to be seen and heard and integrated. Our gifts need to be shared. And yeah, I don't have the poetry right now with me and the music. But I like to bring the wilderness of my land because we are also endangered. You probably know we also had the floods, we had the droughts, and now this year in March we had the floods, the biggest floods ever. So yeah, we're in it together. Yeah.
Thank you.
My peoples are from a land near Iran. That strip connecting Europe and Africa that empires have fought over for thousands of years, who were colonized and enslaved and raped 80 or 100 generations ago. And that place that has many, many names today called Israel or Palestine. I was born in another empire, the Soviet Union. When I was 9, my family immigrated to another empire, the United States. My peoples, I think, have struggled to maintain connection to their indigenous ways, to honor the fact that the earth doesn't belong to anyone, and at the same time assimilating and being complicit with empire. I think my soul has always yearned for some kind of a reconnection that's been awakened even more in the last 5 years, in learning that we are almost perhaps done with our project of destroying all life around us, and a kind of spiritual archaeology to find the indigenous parts of my own Jewish tradition, and to learn from other indigenous folks, especially those that still have an unbroken chain of memory of how to be in living relationship with all of our kin, not just the human kin, but the plant kin and the bird kin, and the micro kin underneath our feet, and the clouds and the sun, and not just to talk about it in beautiful, powerful language, but actually to sit in ceremony, as we were taught this morning, in real ceremony. So I am deeply excited that I think this conference is starting to shift towards uplifting and centering, not just uplifting, towards centering the voices of indigenous folks, especially those that still have that memory. And I hope, I request that we make as much space possible to sit in ceremony with them.
Thank you so much. When you were speaking, this energy was arising in me, and I did not want to come up here and share it. And then when you were finished, it came stronger, and it just moved me, so here I am. And I'm grieving because I'm from nowhere and everywhere. My people are probably 35% Scottish, 35% Irish, maybe a little bit of British, from 150 years ago, and after that, all Canadian from all over Canada. And I don't feel like I belong anywhere until the first time I came over to these islands, and I went, oh, right, this is where I'm Indigenous, right. And my whole life I've lived with a country that has two countries in it. We have the First Nations people, and we have the children of the colonists. And I'm trying to sort out that relationship. But the thing is, when you're inviting, and I'm longing for this too, to listen to all of those wisdom traditions that are unbroken in that connection with the earth. And I need to stand here and claim that mine is also unbroken in connection with the earth, because it's my cellular memory, it's my soul knowledge, and I'm Indigenous too.
And I just want to speak out one invitation, which is that we always breathe between one contribution and the next contribution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayuri and Moshe. I'm French, born in the US, studied here in the UK. I have a little brother from Peru, a little sister from India. I learned most of what I know today in Afghanistan. I now, after 7 years in Rome, live in Denmark. I'm Charlotte, and in my spiritual home of the Ananda community, I am Karuna Devi. Karuna is compassion. Ananda means joy. Charlotte was going to come in through that door saying she was angry. And she or I am or was angry because of the separation that seems to stick to us in this world, which is part of Maya, part of this collective trance. And I've been a UN technocrat, we can say, part of the establishment, working in sectors that separate things and working with metrics that reduce things. Within that system, trying to build bridges my whole life, because as a nutritionist, you have to build bridges between health and agriculture and education and social protection and on the environment. And then I decided to leave all that to try to bridge that world of the establishment and sectoral silos with the world of consciousness, which I awoke to through Ananda. And I'm trying to do that now. And this morning I felt anger, because I can see when I reach out to my friends in the UN and NGOs with this message of oneness and the sacredness of life, that they smile and they welcome it. And I felt in this last day and a half a lot of judgment and a lot of guilt-laden. And I believe, yeah, we can judge the behaviors, but can we judge the people? And I don't like judgment, personally. I've always been uncomfortable with it. Yes, there are some things that are bad, but I really, really believe that if we're claiming sacredness, it's about oneness, it's about unity, and it's about seeing the light in each and every one of us. Maybe even those who work with Monsanto, I don't know. But we have to reach out. We have to walk the talk of oneness and love. And I chose the door of optimism, because I really trust in the wisdom of the universe, of Christiana. I think if we can rest in that trust and in that love, we will be shown the way, and we have to trust life. And maybe our arrogance is us to thinking we want to fix things, but maybe it's about opening the space for life to happen and nurture us, as she has always done. Thank you.
I was 14 years old when I heard the first time about the Holocaust, and I'm German. And it had an extremely devastating effect on me. And I'm still struggling with this. And I promised myself that I would always speak up. And I was 22 or 23 when we squatted a forest because I wanted to build a power plant in Berlin. And I'm involved in this movement for over 40 years, 45. And I notice I'm so tired. I am so tired. I wake up often in the morning and I don't know where to take off, where to take my hope that we will make it.
I came in through the wild card because for the last year or so, actually it was Beltane of last year, I've been writing Consciousness is the Wild Card. And I've had my journey through grief and my journey through fear and many, many sleepless nights for probably at least a decade, and still go there sometimes. But I'm believing that really the synthesis of all of this is walking through the grief and owning it, and walking through the fear and owning it, and consciousness being the wild card that then leads us to this optimism. So, you've been pretty guided the way you've laid this out here. And there is something called the black swan. There's this concept in complexity science called the black swan, and I'm certainly no expert in it, but it's the concept of a highly improbable event. And so I believe in calling in the black swans because we don't know what form it's going to take. I am an energy healer as well as a writer and a filmmaker, and they all kind of, synthesize together. And so I've written a novel about reversing climate change through time travel. And why not? Why not think about other timelines? Why not think about the quantum? Why not think about connecting with the star beings, the angels, other realms? I'm not talking about not taking responsibility. I'm not talking about just doing a deus ex machina. But that's why I can still come in with optimism. And so I want to honor my friend who I haven't met now. I've spent a lot of time in Afghanistan as a journalist, and so I do speak Dari, Afghan Farsi. So a little bit of a poem that I do remember. Bishanu azne chun hikayat mekana, as Jedi ha shikayat mekana. And this is the beginning lines of the Masnavi of Rumi, of Maulana Rumi. And what it means is, listen to the reed flute as it tells its story. It is crying of separation. So that is the root of this. We're crying of separation from our source. We're crying of separation from Mother Earth. We're crying from nature deficit disorder. And so it's really in this synthesis, in this reconnection, in this wild card that I am choosing to find hope.
My name is Charles. Thank you for the opportunity of speaking. I got involved with climate change because I feel that I have an obligation and I should be doing something to leave the world a better place than when I came into the world. Everyone here, because you're here, I guess hopefully that everyone feels the same about this. But what I think we should be doing is trying to reach out to the wider audience, not just the people on live stream who are also committed, but the wider public out there who basically are maybe aware of climate change and don't know what to do about it. So talking to a lot of people, I see a good level of awareness of climate change, but I don't see enough people who really know what to do about it. So my project is reaching out to people who are aware of climate change, who want to do something about it, and who don't know what to do about it. It's very simple. It's about planting trees. So what's different is that what we want to do is, rather than focusing on an individual journey, a journey you've made by car, by plane, or whatever, look at your average. Look at the average for your country, which for the UK, we're creating 7 tons of CO2 per person. For the USA, Canada, Australia, it's 16 tons. And make a difference by looking to plant as many trees as you can. Now, to remove all of that CO2, if you're from the UK, you need to plant 1,750 trees. And if you're from the US, etc., you need to plant 4,000 trees. Okay, so plant these trees, and the great news is that then, on average, will remove your CO2 for every year that those trees are growing. And don't forget, a lot of the people here traveling a lot, I've heard amazing stories of people traveling all over the place. You may be double that number or more, okay? So if you're double, treble, then you just need to plant more trees. Working with our partner, we can do this very, very cost effectively. It's actually crazily cheap. So for the UK numbers, it's 17 pence per day, £5 a month. For the US, it's 51 cents. So the project, I've got my T-shirt on, okay? The project is n0co2.org. If you'd like to do something about it, or you know some people who'd like to do about it, come and talk to me. Let's talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And just as a reminder, we're encouraging in this circle to express feelings and how you are. Thank you. We'll go over.
Thank you. So I am Gobe from South Central Africa. One of the threads that has been coming out of the climate change discourse is that one of the mistakes that this so-called civilization has made is to commodify everything, to commodify life. And so everything has been commodified, including news. So those of you who have been getting news from South Central Africa, you have had some snippets of Cyclone Ida, but because news is commodified, you don't get the full story. You just get snippets of sensations. It's all about sensationalizing issues and not to tell the story as it is and in a fuller shape. So, part of what is alive in me now is just to briefly share with you the grief in my community, the communities that I'm living and working with. So in my community, we have 3 main seasons in a year. From this time to August, we have a cool, dry season. And then September to mid-November, we have a hot, dry season. Then from mid-November to March, we have a hot, wet season. So what has happened in the last 5 or so months is that in mid-November, when the rains were supposed to start, the rains did not come. Not until January that we got the first few showers, and they were literally showers. And after that, there was another long dry spell. So March or February and March, there was hardly any rain. Then towards the end of March, that's when Cyclone Ida came. And within a few hours, the rain that was supposed to fall over 4 or 5 months fell in a few hours. And we had people literally being washed away. So like in Chimanimani district of Zimbabwe, we had a settlement which was in a valley. It's a mountainous area. And when it started raining, people moved to the police station, which was in the middle of the settlement. And about 200 people gathered there. And the rain was coming through the night. So at about 12 midnight, the 200 people suddenly found themselves marooned. So somebody from the edge threw a rope from a tree towards the police station. So a few people managed to use the rope to escape from that island. But most of the 200 people were just swept away. And after the cyclone, all that remained were just some huge boulders, which were not there before, that had moved from the nearby mountains. Now, the cyclone affected merely the coastal region of my community. But the larger part of the community was affected by the drought. The drought has affected more people than the cyclone. So the people in southern Zambia, the whole of Zimbabwe, they have had 100% crop losses. So that means for the next 11 months, they need food. And water scarcity is a big issue. And for most of these farmers, they've even lost their seeds. So come next season, they will need to get somewhere to start being farmers once again. So it's a much bigger story than just Cyclone Ida. And I just wanted to share that part of what is happening in my community. Thank you.
Yeah, and maybe as we hold a moment of silence for Polly, we can hold a moment of silence for Zimbabwe, Zambia, Malawi, Mozambique. And feel what happens to us if the information doesn't just go into our minds, but touches our very hearts.
There's a lot of grief in this room, and that's not going to go away quickly. It's not right that it should. It honours the reasons why we're grieving, and I've had tears in my eyes a lot of the time I've been here, and flowing today. But I sort of expected to move from there to optimism. I'm always optimistic and focused on what can be done. And I think the right word isn't solutions, there aren't solutions. But actually I found myself coming in through that, labelled anger, and it's quite difficult for me to say that. You know, I feel in our culture it's not acceptable for women to be angry. If we are, we're labelled all sorts of things. And it's very rare for me even to feel something that I will call that. You know, I've been with a therapist and they've said, where is your anger over something? And I said, don't know. Once I managed to come back and say, I felt it. I said, what happened? I just felt, and then it went. But actually, I call on Gaia. I call on our ancestors. Going back through tens of thousands of years, because I've been reminded in some conversations of what's happened to the feminine power in our world, in many parts of the world. And 6 million women in Europe were burnt over the centuries. And we have learnt not to recognise anger, and the anger that is right. Anger is a power. We need it. It's our power because it's right that we should be furious over that we are where we are. We can't change the past. We know in mental health you can't just look back and be stuck there, you'll be depressed or be worried about the future and be caught up in anxiety. We have to be right here, right now. And where does that power come from? I do think, particularly the women who are conscious of this need to find that. It's very dangerous that we could become just soft and nurturing and full of grief and nice. I think we should throw nice away. I want to walk out of optimism, but I want that walk to be powered by anger that I acknowledge and I call on, and I find at the times that fear or grief or anxiety are holding me back, because the anger is still valid and it won't stop us doing what we do. It will enable us, empower us, and make us unstoppable.
Tēnā koutou katoa. My name's Jenny Rowan. I'm from New Zealand, Aotearoa, and had a promise to myself not to do this. So I'm caught with a very old energy I've carried most of my life, which is one around urgency, and it's come up today, sitting right here. And so what I know after many, many years of managing that and using and being with that energy, which has actually given me an extraordinary life, I need to stand here managing that differently now, in a way that has puts me in a different place, in a different conversation, and the only conversation that I want to be in. And I'm inordinately grateful to you, Stephanie, for bringing me from the bottom of the world to this place. Kia ora to you. Kia ora. Now I stand with my mountain behind me, my Mount Taranaki, and I stand alongside my family river of the Waiongana. And I was born in a very beautiful and powerful place in New Zealand in the North Island. And I'm a fourth generationer, and my ancestors, thank you for reminding me I am Indigenous here in Scotland, when they left, when babies were being fed gin, and because the water was polluted and you could hardly see in front of your face in some parts of industrial England. So they got on leaky boats with big insurances, hoping that the boat would collapse and they wouldn't make it. And then they did, and they colonialised this land, my land, and took. And it's interesting for me now that actually in New Zealand that agenda is still incredibly alive and well. It's subtle and it's languaged, and unless you have a good look at the language, but there it is, still taking and still denying and still excluding. So I'm not angry anymore, team. I'm an old feminist, so I've had lots of opportunity to be angry at everything, especially men. And I was just saying to Will this morning, I have come the full circle, because now I can love the men in my life and my sons and my children. So what do I want to say that's sitting with me now? I've been to many conferences. I expect this one to, so I have an expectation, which means I'm building up a premeditated resentment, by the way. So I'll watch that. Yeah, I'll watch that. But I do, because of the work you've done, Stephanie, and those of you who've been utterly, it's been your life, do expect something to come out of this. And your challenge has constantly been to those of us in New Zealand about making sure we do something when we go home. And so I'm really interested in what all of us are going to do when we go back home. And I am running a workshop, won't do the commercial plot on that, but for me, this is an urgent conversation, and we absolutely have no choice but to go home and do a lot of things. And for me, that'll have to have, conversations will have to be couched differently, else I'll be struck off as one of those silly greenies. And those prejudices that sit inside this conversation in New Zealand. So grateful for the knowledge that I'm gathering and mind rearranging and resetting on language and words. But by Friday, and God knows where I'll be by Friday, given some of the journeys I've gone on in the last 48 hours, I'm really interested to have a group collective. What are we going to do? And because collectively, I'd like David Attenborough to be quoting us on some of his documentaries. That's what I'd like, you know, as I'm limited in my imagination on what you can do, Stephanie. But, you know, that level of international exposure, as well as some taki or some mana or some mantra that we can individually take back home on behalf of ourselves to each other. So, kia ora.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody. Thank you.
And again, I just want to say one thing, which is looking at the time. I think this is it. The people now standing, we're definitely not going to be able to listen to more. And we're only going to be able to listen to you if you keep your contributions essential. The heart piece out there. Yes.
Yeah, about the short part and the simple part, it might be a bit difficult because I come in with a lot of complexity and with a lot of different emotions, ranging from the gratitude to be here and to be meeting people who are doing amazing things, through anger and annoyance at some of the elements of how the conference unfolds and is also being directed. And so I kind of find it very difficult to focus on the things, mostly on the things that I enjoy here, because there are some elements that just keep on coming back for me that just bring up a lot of anger and annoyance. So I wanted to speak to that, and I wanted to leave with one suggestion. I wanted to leave it on the table. So the one thing that really triggered me on the first night was the using of a Hawaiian song with no Hawaiians present in the room, with no origin of the song given, with no notes about whether we have consent to use that song. And it is a very dear subject to me because I've spent a couple of months in Hawaii and I've seen the Hawaiian struggle, economical, social, political, and I've been blessed to learn from them a lot about protocol and about respecting the land, but also respecting the elders, which leads me to the second point. I've been really mad about the fact that the indigenous leaders that have traveled from all around the world have not been acknowledged on the first night, that they have not been given the space to be seen. And I feel that's just a part of a wider problem. And I've been talking to some people around, and what keeps on coming up is that, you know, it's Finhorn, everyone has loving intentions. And I do understand that, and I know that putting an event like this together is a huge amount of work that I could probably not pull out, but I do believe that, especially in communities like these, where you're here to keep each other accountable, and I know that some people have done that for me already throughout the 2 days, so I do feel the trust and confidence in coming up and doing the same. So that's the second thing, and I do not want to bring that anger and annoyance in here because I do not believe it to be constructive places to be speaking out of. I do believe in them being constructive emotions to lead us into looking for solutions, but not necessarily, you know, bringing that forth. So I'm gonna, you know, keep that and deal with that by myself. But what I would also like to suggest, what has been coming up for me a lot, is that I've loved all the speeches, and they have left me very energized and with a feeling of a lot of agency and potency and the will to just, you know, like grab whatever I'm feeling and go out into the break and talk to other people and look for solutions. But what has been following the speeches has been like the way I felt it is that my air is coming up, like a balloon is being pumped during the speech. And then before I get a chance to taste the air and take it out and share it and, you know, do something with it, it's being kind of squeezed out of me. And yeah, so I just wanted to maybe suggest that maybe after the speeches, we just leave it at the speeches, not maybe necessarily have a tune in the way that it's being done, because I also believe there are different ways of like spiritual practice and different energies and tones to our practice and the way we process things. And I have felt that what I've been guided into is something I totally do not resonate with, and it actually takes my like energy that has been built up by those speeches and by those ideas away, and a lot of annoyance has come up. So that would be my suggestion. Thank you.
Kia ora. My name is Robin Youngson. I live in New Zealand. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I will try to be brief. I'm a doctor. I've been a leader in healthcare for many years. I've been actively campaigning internationally for decades, in most particular in recent years, to bring more humanity and compassion to healthcare. A few weeks ago, I made the decision to completely stop that, to step back, and I want to try to explain why. In healthcare, in every country, all the 15 countries we've traveled to, myself and my wife Meredith, we find people who are exhausted, who are burnt out, who are in pain, who don't have energy left to give to try to save the planet. And I suspect it's the same in education and justice and every other sector of the world. That's one of the reasons I gave up the struggle. The second reason is that in recent times, I've become aware of the extraordinary healing capacity of human beings. My medical knowledge and understanding is turned upside down after 30 years by discovering a healing practice that in minutes and hours can relieve severe trauma from people, just erase it, with life-changing results. I see in nature miracles of self-healing and self-sustaining in our little community. We live in Raglan in New Zealand. There's a beautiful harbour that was completely silted up and there was dead and no fish and no life. And some volunteers just started fencing off the waterways and planting riparian margins, just a small group. The life of the harbour is transformed, and now the harbour sees life again. And the seagrass has come back like wildfire in the last 2 years, and the shellfish are back. The beaches were muddy, deep, ankle deep in mud. Now they're clean sand, and now when we walk on the beach, there's shellfish for the first time. The fish are back in the harbour. I took my grandson fishing, and we caught 14 fish in 2 hours. This is a living system that has healed itself if we're just wise with small interventions. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama was once asked, what is the most important attribute of a spiritual leader? Because we're on a spiritual quest. This is a spiritual work we're doing. And he thought for a while in silence. And then he said, cheerfulness, which I thought in the beginning was a ridiculous answer. And then when I began to think more profoundly about it, I realized this is a really deep answer. And I lie awake in the night, and my soul calls to me. And my soul says, if this work is a struggle, we will fail. If this work is a struggle, we will fail. If this work is a struggle, we will fail. We need to call people into joyfulness. It's not as if the modern world is great. We have a wonderful opportunity to offer people a better way of living, of reconnecting to their spirit, to the earth. Let's work in joyfulness. Let's give up the struggle, please.
So, my name is Fatima. I was born in Spain, and my heart beats very strong now. mm, what I have observed in the region where I live, where for hundreds of years they have taken out all the goods. It's a very flat land, so industrial farming is very strong there in terms of cereals and wheat, especially wheat. And what I have observed there is that how we need to find a balance. So what the word I feel is wisdom, and it's very connected to what you said now. Because I think we love to do action, and we love to do things, but if we don't stop and observe, we get lost in our actions, and we again make some mistakes, and we don't have the space to really observe. So the other word for me is observation, because what I have observed in the place where I live is that it's the perfect place for solar energy and also wind turbines. So now the little places where there still had some forest, because are more hilly, and it's like a hill, and then it's very flat, is now being replaced with a lot of wind turbines, which is very green. But if we don't stop and really observe, we get lost in it. So I remember a teaching that I follow, Thich Nhat Hanh, Zen master, and this Christmas I had the opportunity to be in a retreat there for the New Year's, and to find the balance between contemplative life or observation and action, because then you can really see moment by moment what is needed and trust in the natural intelligence of the things. Because if we get lost in action and I just plant many trees, it's a great idea, and I'm doing it in my land, in the project I'm starting there. But maybe I get lost in the action, and I need also to give some space for other things. So I think we really feel we need to do, but also not to do is very important. So we can stop and observe and really walk together with the rhythm of nature, so that maybe wisdom arise and we can do something together.
Thank you. And we're going to have time only for 2 more people. So the 5 of you are going to have to decide. And also only if you give each other space.
They're so polite. Just come in. Someone come in.
I'll just be very brief.
Yes.
I mean, I just remembered Aida Shibli, who once said, those of us from crisis regions don't have the luxury of hopelessness. And I'm hoping we get struck a little bit like those people we heard today about, to really feel it and then to do something about something. Otherwise, it's too much comfort. So I'm hoping we get struck a bit, just for a taster. Thank you.
I don't want to speak so much. Yes. I want to reference us to the churning in our bellies. I invite you to feel into your bellies. I invite you to feel the grief that I'm allowing bubbling up through me, inspired by everything you say, brings me closer to this optimism. But I have to let it move. I have to let the water move through me. I have to let you see me weeping.
What I want to know is, how can I open my heart wide enough and be courageous enough and awake enough to be the hands and the ears and the eyes and the voice of the earth and of life? And I don't think I need an answer that's known by the mind, but I need to remember to keep asking the question and follow where it leads.
I'm Spring. Years ago, I would never thought I would come from optimism side. I spend most of my time in the grief. But today I do feel optimistic. I think in the past few days, we've heard a lot of model explaining what's happening, like the modern civilization is a mistake. We've gone too far in one direction, and I've totally part of me still resonate with that narrative, and I have spent a lot of time feeling angry and asking why we're doing this to ourselves. But I just want to share a message through my journey. Today where I am, part of me refused to believe it's an absolute mistake. I'm not saying we are gonna not change and keeping the old way, of course not. But I do believe that Gaia has an intention of evolving us to this point. I cannot speak that intention intelligently with words because I don't think there's words specifically, but I feel it in my heart, I feel it in my body. Like all through this destruction, all through this chaos, there is a clear intention that will bring humanity, bring life forward. And I see that in my own work. The modern scientific way of thinking, the linear way mentality that has brought us construction, I actually use it to reinvent a very ancient form of tradition in my culture, and I give it a new life form. And that has bring me hope and joy and optimism. Thank you.
If it can be one sentence, then yeah.
Each.
Better make it good, huh? I'm frightened. I have a little girl and a little boy, and they're so sweet. And I don't want them to be scared, and I don't want them to be hungry, and I don't want them to be thrown into chaos. Thank you. I too have 2 small children, and that's why I want to make sure that we're getting involved in practical action. And I really love the opportunity to get together, and I know that we have an extraordinary amount of capability and strategy, and I would like to make sure that we don't waste any time on getting on with what we can do. And there are options around old categories that we've used, but since we're in Findhorn, and it's been established on the basis that plants can communicate, and we're looking at climate change and consciousness, maybe we could explore listening to the consciousness of the weather systems and what are the clouds telling us, and what are our different teachers in this room who have direct experience of communicating through their bodies telling us that their landscapes are telling them to talk to us about. And I'd like to focus on bringing out the stories about where people need help in their countries, and when there's mining coming in that's going to take out the forests. I want to know who those mining companies are and what strategies we're going to develop to make sure that those people don't lose their lands and their waters are poisoned and people get fed, so that we don't lose our water system. So yeah, I want to get practical
pretty soon, ideally. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for all your voices. Thank you for all your perspectives. Thank you for the different calls that people make, also for the presencing of your feelings and your ideas. Clearly, we're all very different people working at different levels with different senses of what's needed and how we are, and that's the beauty of a gathering like this. And maybe as people brought their voices, and we called this weaving the voices, because these are all different voices that we carry within us also, you might have found yourself identified with one or two and not so identified with some others, and feel like this is right and this is maybe not so right, or this is my experience and this is not my experience. And today is also called Awakening to Consciousness, and maybe part of the consciousness that we need is the capacity to host all these voices inside us and to identify somehow with all of these voices. So I want to close this beautiful weaving with a poem by Thich Nhat Hanh. Also, you just mentioned him, Vietnamese Buddhist teacher. Some of you will know this poem, but it's an invitation to see if we can disidentify a little bit, to kind of soften our sense about this is right. Maybe it's also good sometimes to keep a sense this is right, but if we do that, how can we also hold the bridge to the other? It's called Please Call Me by My True Names. Do not say that I'll depart tomorrow, because even today I still arrive. Do not say that I'll depart tomorrow, because even today I still arrive. Look deeply. I arrive in every second to be a bud on a spring branch, to be a tiny bird with wings still fragile, learning to sing in my new nest, to be a caterpillar in the heart of a flower, to be a jewel hiding itself in a stone. I still arrive in order to laugh and to cry, in order to fear and to hope. I still arrive in order to laugh and to cry, in order to fear and to hope. The rhythm of my heart is the birth and death of all that are alive. I am the mayfly metamorphosing on the surface of the river, and I am the bird which, when spring comes, arrives in time to eat the mayfly. I am the frog swimming happily in the clear pond, and I am also the grass snake who, approaching in silence, feeds itself on the frog. I am the child in Uganda, all skin and bones, my legs as thin as bamboo sticks. And I am the arms merchant, selling deadly weapons to Uganda. I am the 12-year-old girl, refugee on a small boat, who throws herself into the ocean after being raped by a sea pirate. And I am the pirate, my heart not yet capable of seeing and loving. I am a member of the Politburo with plenty of power in my hands, and I am also the man who has to pay his debt of blood to my people, dying slowly in a forced labor camp. My joy is like spring, my joy is like spring, so warm it makes flowers bloom in all walks of life. My pain is like a river of tears, so full it fills the four oceans. Please, call me by my true names. Please call me by my true names. Call me by my true names, so I can hear all my cries and laughs at once, so I can see that my joy and pain are one. Please call me by my true names, so I can wake up, and so the door of my heart can be left open, the door of compassion. Please call me by my true names, so I can hear all my cries and laughs at once, so I can see that my joy and pain are one. Please call me by my true names, so I can wake up, and so the door of my heart can be left open, the door of compassion. The door of compassion. It's another voice. It's another voice. It's not the truth. It's another voice. Thank you again for a very rich weaving. And we move into a break, and we want to just give you a sense about where you might be heading in the workshops that you're going to next.
Yeah, so, you know, in a way, before we go there, I know our attention is there, but just to consciously also close the space that we've opened. And just give thanks again for the honesty, the authenticity. Thank you. Yeah. So here you can, for a moment, just see all the different places, the names, the titles of the workshops. I think most of you are clear where you want to be. And maybe all the people who are holding a workshop who are in this room right now could just stand up so we can see you. And if you're wanting to go to a specific workshop and you don't quite know where the place is, you can just go to the person who's here now. And then some are super easy, like Vandana Shiva is here in the hall. It's not so hard to find. And yeah, have a great tea break. Enjoy the workshops. And we will come back here all together at 8 o'clock tonight. You have a question?
Where's the Gaia Pavilion? It's right here. It's right out front.
In front of the CC. Any other questions?
In front of the hall.
Sorry?
It stands for the park. It stands for the Park Lecture Room, and it's the building coming out of the Universal Hall. You'd look to the right. It's a stone building there. It's a room in that space.
She'll be more relaxed. She's not very well. She's got See you later.
Me too. The most beautiful days ever. I did for a while. I did. Yeah. I just a bit weight. That's the plot of it. Anyway, good to see you. Second shift.
I know where the old studio is.
What do I do with this cup? I leave it there?
Just like the intention is, and then at the same time we want them to like understand they did. It's just like and then yeah, I was actually speaking to my friends and I was like, I got so triggered. I'm like, don't talk to me. He's like, no. We're just touching it. No. I'm like, yes. And how we just reward noise.
casi. Sí, sí.
That's what I'm hearing, maybe through my filters, where maybe you felt that maybe it was more calm, you know, than like, it's cool, it's fun, you know, kind of
Exactly, like slightly less
yeah?
I went to immersion, like, I fully, I like you.
All right.
I should.
Jake, what's the possibility that you're free this evening? Yeah. And I think there's a lot of maybe both ways. It's that kind of struggle, you know, that village struggle where like they try to use nothing. And I think one of the things
I was going to say, I was going to just see people's blood flow. Or white people.
No,
Not
kidding.
For real. Yeah, for real. You and your fucking soya beans.
Les habitants out there, eux dire dans le commerce, historiquement, vraiment, pour des générations, peut-être, mais les participants, on est fait pour la table, on fait du travail, j'ai énormément de familles, mes arrières qui ont pas mal, la moitié de ma famille qui ont déménagé aux États-Unis, on est vivre, aller travailler dans une vie. J'ai vêtements du textile, tout ça, c'est chemise, c'est au jardin, encore, des endroits
But it's not in the office.
on peut être
No, we have
on peut être
not.
prosper, des entrepreneurs, des chefs de compagnie,
Yeah, all we need to do is send an email around later. Thank you. With a model. Yeah.
Cool. I would love for you to put it in. That's like a silly question. Yes, I would like to put it in. Donc, on n'est pas qui ont. C'est quand même eu un
Basically, any of the cool features that Facebook or WhatsApp Messenger have got, they got there, they did it first, and it's much faster and quicker. So you can jump through.
All right.
And it's not owned by Facebook.
Yes, which is key.
And you can like send cool little face video, 30-second messages like this.
Enjoy your workshop, love. Yes, please, and tell them.
I don't know, she's shouting to them. Oh, Jet, she wants you on, I think. On one. Yeah. Oh, that's the sound, I think.
Two. Two.
Oh, so you've had it forever.
suddenly quiet in here.
Welcome back. What I'll try and do in a very brief opening is synthesize what the different speakers have said and where we are at. So as I mentioned, the age of fossil fuels wasn't just an age of an energy change. It was a change in everything, and it built on an earlier age. It built on an earlier age of about 300 years of colonization. And why is this important? Because if Africa hadn't been enslaved for slaves, and if the land of the First Nations hadn't been grabbed and 90% of them exterminated, and if the amazing production of India, we were the factory of the world at that time when the East India Company came, we were 25% of the world's economy. By the time the British left in 1947, we were 2%. And because we watched very closely how economies and cultures and values and consciousness can be totally broken, in a way, I understand what's going on today, both with colonization through globalization, but also globalization through some of the very mechanical solutions to climate change. The popular historic narrative is the machines in Manchester and Lancashire made the UK great. Now, the wealth transfer had happened before. And the machines would have been absolutely silent without the raw material, without all the cotton being grown across the Americas and in India, without the indigo slavery of India. Without the people to work those cotton fields captured in Africa. I have watched country after country when I've traveled, the slave houses, especially on the Atlantic Ocean, where there was a whole trade in capturing human beings. And that is what made both the labor and raw material supply possible. Industrialization and in the internal combustion engine made it look like it's about the efficiency of the machine. And our whole mind was shifted to a mechanical paradigm, to a mechanical way of viewing the world, and a mechanical way that had to get rid of a consciousness. There were some running the money machine, and the others were cogs in that money machine. And industrialism for me is that. There's a brilliant book by Gandhi called Hind Swaraj, Freedom for India. Now, interestingly, he wrote it while traveling by ship from England to South Africa. And he literally wrote it by hand in one journey of the ship, 1909. Way before we had freedom. But he's gone through a dialogue, and it's a dialogue on industrialism. And this is 150 years of Gandhi. We do an annual course on Gandhi and globalization. Part of it was when globalization hit us, everyone was wondering, how do you deal with this? How do you deal with this parachuting of a trade system from above? Now, in 1716, the East India Company had imposed such a free trade agreement on India, where the taxes become unequal, where local production is destroyed, where policing supports the trade system, everything else, and literally where slavery supply becomes the basis. Last year, 2 years ago, was 100 years of the Indigo civil disobedience. Because at that time, a part of India, first Bengal, then Bihar, peasants could only grow indigo, the blue dye. They couldn't grow food. They were starving. They had no clothes. And when Gandhi came back and visited that area, and the peasants were saying, we would rather die than grow indigo, which is what our Extension Rebellion people are in effect saying by being on the streets. Of course, they were going to arrest him, and it's brilliant at this place called Champaran, where, interestingly, the 1984 author, Orwell, was born in that place. So there has to be something about place that was mentioned so often, especially in the introductions this morning. And they said, you can't enter this area. And he said, no, my conscience calls me to support my brothers and sisters. And if your laws force of me that you will arrest me, arrest me. But my conscience, which is the higher law, tells me to not obey your law and obey my higher law of solidarity with my brothers and sisters. Now that is the principle I followed in life from my early days of activism about 45 years ago. That there are brute laws created by the money machine. You're sitting in front of me, look at South Africa's story. It was all about slavery. It was about apartheid and separation. It about division on the basis of the color of your skin. And that was Gandhi's first satyagraha, the first non-cooperation, where there was a compulsory registration of citizenship on the basis of race. He said, we are one humanity. We will not be divided by race. He went to jail. But he said, we will not obey this law. So there, in my view, the highest law, and that's what the climate and consciousness discussion is about, the highest law is the consciousness of us being part of a sacred universe. The law that flows from that universal law are the laws of Gaia, of the possibility of this amazing living planet to organize her systems. The reason James Lovelock called her Gaia was because as a NASA scientist, he was so surprised to see that the Earth maintains her temperature through her living mechanisms. That she creates the living conditions for maintaining the temperature. And that temperature is what has allowed one species, ours, to evolve for a few 100,000 years. Very short life on this planet compared to its 3.5 billion years of life systems and 4.5 of the Earth's evolution. We're a blip. So, you must be reading a lot. Everywhere the obesity has become a big problem, and everywhere diabetes is becoming a big problem. And it's being called metabolic disorder. What's a metabolic disorder? A metabolic disorder is the self-regulatory processes of a system getting disrupted. And the body can't regulate its production and maintenance of sugar in this case. Gaia has her own self-regulatory systems. And doing the two things simultaneously, chopping the forest, destroying the small farms, destroying biodiversity, and pumping too much of the greenhouse gases, which are carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, methane, not just carbon dioxide. the bigger destabilizing gas is nitrous oxide, 300 times more damaging to the climate. These greenhouse gases have, in fact, in the atmosphere, but on the ground, the metabolic disorder is created by the destruction of life on Earth. And the two processes are not separate. The same actions that destroy the small farms and the hedgerows and the farm trees are actions that replace all the ecological functions of living soil, living ecosystems with fossil fuel and chemicals. So these are not two separate phenomena. The destruction of biodiversity and life on Earth and species extinction and the destabilization of the organizing and regulatory capacity of the Earth in the atmospheric level are one indivisible ecological process, because the Earth is one indivisible Earth. And I think that's the first leap in consciousness we need to make. Because as long as we continue to think mechanically, and we continue to think within the short-lived 200 years of an industrial paradigm, we will not look at all the options before us. The first option being that we are not meant to be cogs in an industrial and money machine. We have a deeper meaning. We are not cogs in a machine. But for the very young people who are in this room, they get it. Because they're watching. They're watching the 2008 collapse. I go to Italy, I go to Greece, I go to Spain. 50% young people lose possibilities to work. Why are the yellow vests on the streets of France? No work. And now, it's not that artificial intelligence is the next step, but the same money machine finds in artificial intelligence a useful tool for more control. And it's doing the next level of industrialism. The first aspect of industrialism that is pushing us is to further make us think mechanically, forgetting our multiple intelligences. This morning, when we had that little exercise of the connection of our bodies and the earth, that we are one body, we are not separable. I have called this eco-apartheid, because apartheid means separation. Eco-apartheid means the illusion of the separation between the earth and us. We would be very dead if we were truly separated. We wouldn't be able to breathe. I wouldn't have water to drink. And I'd say thank you to the water of Finland. I'm grateful to any water. I come from a land where we used to sing Sujalam, the land of the beautiful waters and the great rivers. In 30 years I've seen our rivers die, our groundwater disappear, and our rivers being turned into drains of pollution. So I'm very grateful to the water that quenches the thirst of all beings, and to the soil that gives food. And I'm very, very grateful to being able to breathe clean air. Because Delhi, as you might notice off and on, has become a hellhole because we removed all limits on automobiles. When I was growing up, 4% of India had cars. We still have 4% or a little more that has cars. But my landlord in Delhi has 5 cars. One for the weekend, one for the picnic, one for the husband, one for the wife. It's quite amazing, because I have a chapter in my book, Soil Not Oil, which I wrote during that period, the lead up to Copenhagen, because I really watched us change from being a land of the sacred cow to becoming a land of the sacred car. I mean, earlier we would have beautiful, when you enter a village, you'd have a little temple, and there'd be a cow. Now they pay people to capture cows and remove them. And any small town you have the showroom. In even small places, you have showrooms of cars. And they are stacked like temples. And they pray to the car. We have a lot of ceremony But like Uncle was saying, when your ceremony separates the relationship making and becomes a mechanical repeat of performance, it becomes a ritual. So what they used to do to the cow, put a teacup, put a garland. They do to the cow when they buy it. It's so funny. This mechanical piece, they've substituted it. So that shift in consciousness is so big. But the second part, and I think this is the part that's still missing in the discussion, and that is the part that the very calculus and consciousness of the fossil fuel age and the industrial age, which has given us the symptom of climate change, but also the impact on the other species, gave us the reality of making human beings disposable. For the first time, suddenly, you could either fit into earlier the mines and the mills, or you had to move to North America as dispossessed people. Rhodes, who over Zimbabwe, used to be called Rhodesia. And he's written, he says why they had to get to Africa, because things were so miserable in England. You had to escape and then declare others as less, which is another aspect of the mechanical age, the fossil fuel age, the industrial age, the birth of anthropocentrism. We are superior to other species. The birth of racism. We are superior to other races. The birth of religious fundamentalism. Civilizing mission was based on the superiority of the Christian religion, and therefore allowed the extermination of all sacred religions of the earth. Around the world, you will see a desacralization of indigenous temples and the building of churches on that site. Everywhere in the world, everywhere in the world. Because it was a rewriting of the narrative of the sacred. But this disposability to me is the heart of it. And with this idea that intelligence isn't in a plant, intelligence isn't in the earth, in the soil, in the animal, in the Gaia as a whole, that she's not an intelligent being, that our bodies are not intelligent, that we don't have multiple kinds of intelligence, emotional, cooperative, compassionate intelligence. We have so many forms of intelligence. The fossil fuel age reduced it to a mechanical intelligence. The mechanical intelligence is now being downloaded into computer learning, and that's called artificial intelligence. But the artificial intelligence in the computer is only the reduction and transfer and outsourcing of one form of reductionist thinking. All the others are available to us. Now, for the young people, they're saying already on this path, and they've always, that's the point about the mechanical age, that the path that is set is the only path of progress, only path of development, is the only way to go. And that inevitability is being brought into the next stage of the mechanical age. And they're saying 99% humanity will be useless. 99% humanity will be useless. So, if we connect all of these different strands, the consciousness shift of us forgetting we are part of a living, sacred, abundant earth, and have a higher law to obey, according to that the disruption of the law of carbon and the law of nitrogen is one element in the disruption of the highest complex self-organizing systems of the world. They're highly complex. They're not one-dimensional, they're not linear. But for convenience, of course, we can understand the carbon cycle by itself. For convenience, we can understand the nitrogen cycle by itself. But we cannot imagine that that's all the Gaia is. Then there's the law, and this, to me, these are the things I'm working on right now, because we've just had an attempt to undo a law that recognized the first rights of the indigenous people of the forests of India. I wrote this law with the government 10 years ago, when we had governments who would think. And there's been an attempt to undo it. 11 million forest dwellers to be uprooted from the forests. 11 million. So I have a book called Origins, which is not available yet outside because I've just written it. I'm trying to synthesize all my learning. What I'm basically saying is, if we are part of this amazing earth, and the earth has her own laws, and we are one species and one being among many other beings, we have, not only are we not superior to other beings, we are not inferior to them either. No other being is told, sorry, you can't eat. The earth never says to the bird, sorry, no food. All the insects had the right to exist. The smallest microbes. And the mechanical mind, combined with the militaristic thought, treats anything living and free as an enemy to be exterminated. This is the issue of feminism. This is an issue of dominance of a certain frame of mind which is afraid of the freedom of the other. The freedom to be alive. The law that allows life on earth, which is the earth's law and the law of life and the universe, is a law that also applies to us as human beings. And what I'm saying increasingly, because we are part of the earth and we are part of nature, these are natural laws. They're given by us being part of the earth and us being earth citizens. They're not given by states. And the states cannot take them away. And the reason for me Extinction Rebellion is important, it's basically saying we will shape our ways. We will not wait for the state's permission. And democracy, I wrote the book Earth Democracy, in which, I'm saying democracy is not just putting your vote in a ballot. We're having a 2-month election in India. It's crazy. 2 months? Of propaganda machines working. True democracy is living in freedom with others' freedom. And in your living, creating the freedom of others. And that's why nature is such an important teacher, and that's the reason I've created the Earth University, because I've learned so much through the work on biodiversity conservation and seed saving. And on the farm, every day there's a new lesson to be learned. And that's why we open up for courses, we open up for visitors and volunteers and interns. And this 1-month course I mentioned, the A to Z of biodiversity, agroecology and organic farming, is exactly every aspect of the solution, including the shift in mind. That shift in mind and that shift in consciousness, besides removing us from being in the driver's seat, being part of an amazing evolutionary process, it also shifts the ground from the idea that the earth is just for us. It shifts the ground from this discourse that was privileged people's rights. And other human beings don't have rights, and no other species has rights, because they're not sovereign beings. I see rights flowing from duties. The duty to protect the earth. And the duty at this moment of climate catastrophe is the duty to unconditionally care for the earth and her species. And live democracy through the practice of being in the service of all life on earth. And creating living economies. Because part of what the money machine has done is made us so dependent on the flow of money and making us fully running on the treadmill of more money and more money and more money. If the river is clean, I can drink clean water for free. If it's polluted, I buy water. Yeah? And it's for everything. As on being part of the earth, being citizens of the earth, and a healthy earth, as that is depleted, the mediation of money to meet our needs becomes increasingly important. But that mediation becomes less and less accessible to more and more people, which is the problem of poverty and hunger. Totally created and man-made. Totally solvable if we re-embed in the Earth's systems. So living economies are economies built according to the laws of nature. Living democracies is practice of democracy, knowing we are part of the web of life, and that our freedom and the freedom of every other being and every other human being is interconnected freedom. There are no individual freedoms. They can't be. The freedom to grab and take can be individual. The freedom to sustain life has to be interconnected. It's one indivisible freedom. And out of this, I feel we grow the living cultures and the shift in consciousness that is necessary not just to address the climate catastrophe, but to address the other problem our societies are facing. And I feel this will kill us before climate catastrophe kills us, which is the politics of hate and exclusion and fear. So in this interconnected web of life, recognizing we are part of an amazing process and letting that unleash the energies within us and the energies of all the relationships. And saying, no, we don't have to be in control. We have to be participants in this generous process of the maintenance, creation, renewal of life. Now we can have questions. You got a whole hour. Yeah.
Sometimes it's said that the fossil fuels, or when the use of fossil fuels started, it had all these damaging causes. Would you say, what I'm thinking about is this false consciousness, the notion of separation has always been there and caused everything what goes wrong? Or would you say there was a certain moment where people fell out of connectedness?
Well, if you heard carefully in the morning, not a single culture had the problem of separation. Everything they said was about being part of the earth, being part of, talking about having a good night's sleep, and did God come and sleep with you? That even your daily act of getting to bed, that you have to be blessed. Look at the sleeping disorders all over the world. Yeah? I think each culture has had its mini problems. It's not the case that cultures are perfect. But this convergence of multiple separations is a product of the industrial age and fossil fuel age. All of them together. And because industrialism rode on the backs of colonialism, where the world had been captured, and it was one empire, this could be imposed. I'll give you just two examples from my country. So I just mentioned in passing Ayurveda, the science of life, the oldest healthcare system. Now so celebrated, I know in America every third person goes to Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine. But I had to go for the 100 years anniversary of the first Ayurvedic college. And while I was there, they were explaining to me the reason the college had to be created is they had banned Ayurveda. Because Ayurveda used to be taught in what we call the Guru Shishya Parampara. You had a teacher and you learned. You stayed with the teacher and learned, just like for music, for art. And they made it illegal. So the founder decided to organize a medical system in the image of the Western allopathic system, the medical college, a pharmacy, everything else, to be able to sustain Ayurveda. Yeah? So none of this, was particular because of the empire. It was universalized immediately. The mechanical mind, the industrial mind. I would call Western allopathic medicine industrial medicine. I definitely call what is being pushed on the world, and I watch this every day, industrial food. So fossil fuel gives rise to a particular way of producing, consuming, thinking, etc., and a false consciousness, which is industrialism. And this gave rise to a redefinition of the economy. Where, so, I feel so grateful I was doing physics and quantum theory in innocence in my early days, because I read all the shaping texts in my old age. But can you imagine in economics, there's capital, there's labor, and there's land. Capital creates, land and labor are just inputs in a production process. All of Marx and everything is about appropriation of labor. But land is the creative earth. Labor is creative, productive people. Capital is a dead construct. We just shifted. Where does creation take place? And I've learned so much of this because of my dealings with Monsanto. They constantly claiming creation. I say, GMO for them means God move over. They say, no, the seed is our invention. We invented the seed, so the farmers must pay. Yeah? So this illusion of creation was built into it. And how deep can the falseness of consciousness be? Where dead machines and constructed capital becomes the creative force of running our lives. And we forget our own potential, and we totally neglect the potential of the earth. And that is the potential that is waiting to be rejuvenated and regenerated. The second example I wanted to give was, there was a very famous physicist of India called J.C. Bose. He was a physicist. He was, this big debate on electromagnetism. He actually had the work done before Macaroni. Macaroni? Yeah. But he was, what he'd do is he'd do electromagnetic experiments with plants. And he said, but they're living. Because when you say nasty things, the electromagnetic waves show it. They get hurt. They're sentient beings. Big debate. Amazing. His research, and then he decided to go through experiments of separating the room. Sending love and sending hate. Sending violent messages and sending caring messages. And the electromagnetic waves which show in the behavior of the plant. So I think our neglect of the creativity, intelligence in life and us as part of life is the biggest sacrifice we've made in these 200 years. And if we don't reclaim that potential of creativity and those intelligences, we will never be able to find a solution to the multiple catastrophes we face. But if we find that, and that's the shift in consciousness, then everything just falls into place in such a natural way.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to make a quick comment on slavery, something that I think is of interest, because the UK takes pride in having been at the relative forefront of abolition. But interestingly, the government found in today's terms many billions of pounds to pay compensation when slavery was abolished to slave owners, and never a penny to people who were enslaved. It's just an interesting example of how the system works. I wanted to ask you a question more about exploitation of animals. You've mentioned the different greenhouse gases. We know that some of them come largely from animal farming, for example, and I'm also wondering about the change in consciousness. Is it time that we emphasize how we treat other species more and not just always speak about petroleum and burning oil and such like in terms of the environment?
Okay. I mentioned methane as the sixth greenhouse gas. All animals don't emit methane. Factory animals emit methane because they are fed intensive feed of soybean and corn. And that's why even in the literature, that's why I find so much of this a bit contrived. Because even in the FAO, they don't do the assessments of emissions from factory farms. They do enteric, what's it called? Well, stomach.
Enterointestinal.
Yeah, so they put it as a generic. I'll be a little crude right now because it makes total clarity. Our cows don't fart. You know, they graze on grass. Free-ranging cows and free-ranging goats and free-ranging sheep don't stink. In fact, we have a festival after the Festival of Lights, Diwali, but the festival is called Gobardhan. Gobar is the cow dung. Dhan means the wealth of cow dung. And we literally dedicate a day to worship cow dung. We wouldn't worship if it stank like the factory farm outflow. So I think false equivalence is a very big problem of the industrial age and the mechanical mind. To connect the free-range cow and the fact, to equate the free-range calf, goat, cow with a factory animal, which is the source of methane, is very wrong. If you were here when Uncle spoke, no, you weren't. You should have been here. Because he's made a very interesting dialogue. He was talking, he was rotating around the floor and not sitting squat like me, but he said, I know more than you. Because I know how to hunt. And I talk to the animals. And they give me permission. And they select the animal that we, as my tribe, where only animals are in Greenland Island, they don't have farms, they give me permission which animal to use. Now that relationship, we are sitting with the blessings from Namibia. I'm not going to go tell her, no. If you notice the Amazonian tribe, they have feathers, they had all kinds of animal products, but they have a sacred relationship with the animal. Now, the industrial mind, combined with the colonizing mind, takes the problems of the industrial age, including the industrialization of animals, extrapolates it to any animal anywhere, and criminalizes the relationship. I watch this. I've watched people in India being attacked for wearing leather shoes. And there's a very beautiful episode somewhere in one of Gandhi's books where, he intervened a lot in the cow issue is very political in India, and there's always the fundamentalists who lynch human beings. Something going on right now for the animal issue. But Gandhi talks about how the cow in living, she gives us this and this and this and this and this, and even when she's dead, she gives us leather. Yeah? Cows are not killed for leather. Dead cows, their skin becomes leather. People are lynched in the leather making. They're craft people who make beautiful leather shoes. And somewhere someone's coming with rubber choppers, Or they didn't have synthetic at that time. They didn't have fossil fuels turned into everything, our clothes, our shoes, everything. So they come with rubber choppers and showing off, I'm wearing rubber because I don't want to be non-violent to the cow. And Gandhi says, wearing leather is not violence to the cow because she gifted us the leather when dead, but wearing rubber is violence to the maker of artisanal leather products. They too are part of the earth family. Yeah? And the question you've asked is extremely important at this moment. Because just like I was saying, and as was reiterated this morning, there's on the one hand a carbon reductionism going on. But on the other hand, there's an animal reductionism going on, that every animal on the earth is like a factory animal. And every relationship of every culture to every animal is of objectification, which is not. It is not. I watch tribals worship the animal they'll kill. They literally pray to the animal and seek permission. I have watched fishermen go to sea who catch fish but pray to the sea and take permission to fish. But there is another. So one is false equivalence. Factory cows are not the same as free-range animals. Relationships of the earth family with other animals, we are animals. So I think we should stop talking animal agriculture. We are animals. We need more human beings to farm. Therefore, we need animal farming because this animal must be on the land to help the earth. Isn't it true? This animal must get back to work. It was made disposable by fossil fuels. We forgot our animalness. We have to remember our animalness. And in fact, a lot of the discourse that is extrapolating the factory farm into everything else is continuing the apartheid between us and other animals. But there's a second issue, because there's a nonsensical report that has come out. I'm sorry, whoever's recording it. It's sponsored by the big industry that has destroyed agriculture and the food system. Bayer, which has now bought Monsanto, BASF, Cargill, which is the big trading, Nestle, Pepsi, Yara, the biggest fertilizer company. I talked a lot about the fertilizer role in climate change. A lot of talk in this thing about exactly the thing you've said, that if we solve that problem, everything will be fine. And then they go on to talk about plant-based diets. And yesterday in the discussion, you remember when there was a question on the Amazon, and I talked about the violence to the soya bean, the violence to the Amazon, and the violence to the people of the Amazon to grow that soya bean. That is not a culture of compassion. So if there is a continuity of life on Earth, which there is, if we believe we are part of the Earth family, there's microbes, there's plants, there's animals of which we are one species, there's the Earth as a whole. The violence and non-violence yardstick has to be applied across the spectrum in every aspect. And these false universalizations which come from a false consciousness, which are so much part of a violent mode of thinking, that criminalize everyday non-violent behavior of cultures far away, and put in place policing systems of an amazing kind. I'll give you just one more example of my country. So, as I said, we are a land of the sacred cow. So, 2 years ago, not only did lynching start, 3 years ago, lynching start of Muslims who eat meat. And it's part of the politics of hate and divide. But a law was put in place on trade. Now, because I worked on seed, I know what laws forbidding trade in seed means, that farmers can't exchange seed, that you then have to buy from Monsanto. So part of what I've done is seed saving, is defend the right of farmers to save and exchange seed. Saving and exchanging animals is similar freedom. Because if you're not able to exchange, you're going to you will have to buy patented animals for one function, just to produce meat, just to produce milk. And this then has meant that in a very strange way, those who talk of defending animal rights joined with the government to ban trade in animals, local trade in animals, which means local breeding, just like in local seed exchange. If any of you know about India, you think of the fairs. There's a very famous fair, Pushkar fair, where everyone goes to Rajasthan. It's an animal fair. It's an animal fair. We have fairs of the camels and fairs of the elephants and fairs, and these fairs are where the breeding and exchange takes place. By banning local breeding and local exchange, what's happened is not only have the original breeders of animals been criminalized, which is something I resisted in seed. But cultures of breeding are being criminalized, and there was a non-cooperation movement in Tamil Nadu which said, this is our culture, it's our sacred festival. You're not going to say, no, we won't, we will do it. And the law had to be unturned because they had the capacity to organize. But more significantly is, in the name of taking care of the animal, for the first time, my beautiful civilization of the sacred cow has a problem of abandoned animals. And they're now raising crops to the ground. It's the big issue. You can't do agriculture because there are abandoned animals everywhere, because you made having an animal a crime. So it's very complex. No, let me end up. What is the mechanical mind? The mechanical mind is everything's a machine, everything can be controlled, everything can be fixed, and it's all a linear function. I think we have to get rid of linearity and monoculture thinking. You had your hand up, you had another question to ask. But let's move on to someone else. Yeah.
Questions about education. So in order... So some of the problems that we're facing, well, the problems we're facing are around the mechanical mind. Our whole education system, our industrial education system, is set up to foster that. I'd just be really interested to hear from you, what kind of education do we need to imagine to be able to support our young people to change from that paradigm, and to support the young people who are out on the streets now, because they're obviously looking for a different type of education and future too. Thanks.
I think in every challenge we face, I think we have to adopt the approach of biodiversity. Because there isn't one perfect solution. And every place is somewhat different. Some places, the public education is being dismantled, and defending the public university is important. Some other places, the teachings are getting so badly privatized. I mean, wherever I travel to universities, I can't believe the new buildings are only biotechnology, management systems, and information technology, as if humans need no other learning. Liberal arts colleges are being shut down. Music, no, why should you teach music? History, what's the point? Languages, forget it. You have to be better, efficient cogs in the machine, and when AI comes, to be thrown out. Yeah? So what kind of education? The reason I started the Earth University, and I've been coming to Schumacher since it was made in '91, those are learning centers. We have to create learning centers that connect the work of care for the earth with learning the best about how the earth works and how things work in the world. That, to me, is what science is. And that's why we have created in schools in India gardens of hope. And when principals will say, but what will they learn? And I show them. I say, they learn mathematics, that a seed becomes 100 seeds. They can learn how to multiply. They will learn how to measure growth, the plant grows. They will know how to do physics and osmosis. They learn geology, and they learn soils. What can't they learn in a living ecosystem? Gandhi had a very beautiful, he was so comprehensive because he was dealing with an empire that had destroyed everything. They called it Nai Talim, the new learning. And it was learning whatever you need to, but by doing, being in the practice. Being in the practice. And that means for sure, coming back to the anthropocentric hierarchy, anthropocentric hierarchy went hand in hand with the learning hierarchy. That there were certain things defined it as low. Manual work was low. Farming was low. Sitting at a desk was high. Now sitting at a computer is higher. Now the robot sitting at the computer is highest. So we've got to get rid of that hierarchy of knowing. Anything that sustains life is high learning. And the miracle, when I see how much we've buried in 200 years, from my own culture, from the sciences that weren't taught, and how through these learning centers, where you learn from nature, that's what the Earth University is. You learn from nature. People you trashed and said, farmers don't know, traditional societies don't know, they never went to school. Our farmers are amazing. They know far more than the PhDs. The PhD knows one mushroom species. And he knows how to keep making that mushroom. The farmers know everything. You know? And of course, learning from each other and learning community. That's why places like Findhorn are so important. That part of what industrialism and the mechanical mind did was not just mechanize the world outside, it mechanized us into atoms. You remember your brilliant prime minister who said there is no society, there are only individuals. And that was how neoliberalism was founded. Only individuals can participate in neoliberalism, communities participate in life. So we've got to get out of the mechanical, industrial slavery. We have to reclaim community, because by being part of Earth community, new potentials are discovered. By being part of our local communities, new potentials are created. And education for all that is the doing of it.
Do you want to ask a question next?
Yeah. Is this on? Okay, so this is from the live stream. It comes from Nicola Coombe in London. She's asking, how do we develop people's or our whole life consciousness, and within that, our own spiritual consciousness in the presence of the climate catastrophe? Do you want me to repeat that, or?
No, I got it.
Great. Okay.
I think first by remembering that we are part of a very sacred, and very benevolent, and very generous Earth. And we messed up. But we don't have to treat the messing up as irreversible. Because A, it was a short time, 200 years is a short time. The 1% who pushed it all into it is a very narrow number. 1%, 200 years, how can we say this is the only way and we can't do anything about it? So I really feel the issue of spirituality is both an issue of reclaiming our being part of a sacred earth, but in the process also discovering our inner powers to transform. That's why when I said yesterday, we are energy, we are power. Because energy now is defined as something you take from outside to get rid of doing something yourself. Yeah. Like we work a lot in the villages, and sometimes we want to help a group. So I bought a mixie for a group. The women threw it away because we take it on stone and grind everything like that. Also very good for osteoporosis. Never get osteoporosis when you do that. Make a chapati, make the chutney. It's very, very good. Do the chakki. I'm going to do a book one of these days, The Yoga of Food and Farming. How everything that you do in yoga, you do by living a life of producing good food and caring for the earth. So the spirituality of our being, and I think that's what Stephanie was trying to make us work through, that this amazing body has to be reclaimed as a spiritual being. That's also what Uncle said. We are spiritual beings. We might be atheists, but we are spiritual beings.
Do you want to? So, Vandana, I'm sorry to ask you a practical question, but I suppose we're farming, and we're farming in an organic farm in Kerry in the south of Ireland, and sometimes we get very disillusioned thinking that us doing our little bit on a small patch of earth is not enough. And in 2016, there was Eurostats that said that Ireland had only 1% of our farms were growing vegetables. And to me, that's really shocking. And when we drove from the whole length of Ireland, actually, to come here from the south to the north, we didn't see one field with vegetables. And you mentioned yesterday about the grass. And yet, I hear farmers being demonised, but as you said, farmers have the knowledge. And I suppose my question is, what could we go back with to talk to farmers in that context where, yes, the land is all grass and it's all dairy and it's all beef predominantly? What first steps should we be? We're always saying, we need to be we need to be organic, we need to be everything, but that's kind of falling on deaf ears because we feel we're so far from that. What should we be looking for? What should we be trying to do? We're kind of a bit disheartened.
So I think the first issue is, when you see with your own eyes the lack of food, while the narrative of the industrial food system is We've never had more food. And the industrial system and fossil fuels and chemicals allowed us to grow more food. False. It grew more commodities. 90% of the corn and soya go for biofuel and animal feed. It's not sustaining the earth. Both biofuel and animal feed are further destructions of the earth. And animal feed is the big problem of the animal issue, the factory farming. It uses 100 times more to produce 1 unit of edible food. Industrial agriculture uses 10 units of energy to produce 1 unit of food. Working with the earth allows us to use 1 unit of energy to produce 10 units of food. So what's more productive? Second, I have books lying outside. The nutrition per acre. So much more when you care for the soil, you care for the plant, you intensify the biodiversity, and not the chemicals, and not the capital, which is the reason for debt. Now, all of these external inputs, fossil fuels, chemicals, bigger farm machinery, bigger harvesting machinery, has all added to the debt crisis. The debt crisis has led to farm closure. I remember about 20 years ago, it was the peak of the GMO debate in England. And I remember Meacher was your environment minister, and we had a meeting, and there was, tractors had come in, and in the evening we had a panel. And one of the people on the panel was the Small Farmers Association head. And he arrived late, and he had tears in his eyes. And he said, "I've just stopped being a small farmer, I'm a truck driver now." So these fossil fuel capital-intensive inputs are the reason for the dispossession of family farms and small farmers, which is the reason for the caretakers of the land being forcefully removed from the land and careless technologies invading in their place. The final equation in all of this is the industrial system, that is increasing the costs of production, where the farm is a market for selling ever-increasing inputs. 50% of the European budget, tax budget, 50% of the tax money of Europe goes to factory farming and industrial agriculture. Can you imagine how every economic problem could be solved? There'd be no need for austerity if you just shut down the industrial farming. But the same system has put trade in the hands of a handful of corporations. The 4 grain trading giants and the 4 junk food makers, and a handful of retail giants like the Walmarts. Together, they drive down the prices. They create what's called a monopsony. They're a monopoly buyer. And therefore, the prices of what the farmer sells is crashing. The system is designed to end farming by farmers, real farming for real food. Now, people can be indifferent to this, but the problem is that fake food, those commodities, are what's killing us through chronic diseases. And you'll see downstairs, we have a new manifesto on food for health, how the health of the planet and our health is one health. The chronic diseases are just exploding. We've just lost poly to cancer. Only 5% cancers are genetic. The rest are all because of toxics in the environment. Add up all of the disease epidemic related not to infectious diseases, but to chronic food-related diseases. It's becoming too big a cost. Can be solved with good eating. And therefore, I don't think it's an issue of a method of farming anymore. It won't do, because the rest of the system will make you collapse no matter how good you're farming. It's creating food communities and food communities. And given the rising cost of production, the falling prices, the only way to increase the prices and reduce the costs is to go ecological and go local. And our work in Navdanya has shown that the farmers are earning 10 times more by reclaiming this simple sovereignty of their seed, of their food, and methods of cultivation, and methods of distribution. And of course, there'll be all kinds of laws that will come in the way, that you can't do this and you can't do that. That's when you have to be ready like Gandhi, to say a higher law to sustain the earth, to sustain people's health through good food, requires us to not obey your shallow, brute, untruthful law.
Can you use the mic?
of machine, using electronic or using machine for farming instead of deployment of farmers. For example, yesterday you talked about, you say machine, No, I've just forgotten. Yeah, but I could see now that technological is going there where farmers are here. So people are cultivating their lands, those people who are better off, using machines and the like. Even chemicals, they're applying chemicals to their garden using possibly a drone and the like. So that means technology is really advancing and it goes faster. We're leaving the farmers behind. Nobody is behind sensitizing the farmers. Farmers were depending upon those people, but those people are going with their technologies. So there's a gap whereby those people who are benefiting, they were finding some resources from those people. They're no longer finding resources. That means they're stranded here. As a result, they're causing climate change in the sense that they're looking here and there where they can get money. Instead, they're now starting cutting trees, doing this, trying to, they're doing a lot of nonsense, contributing to climate change. Then we're claiming to say, let's join hands so that we try to curb this phenomenon of climate change. But we forget to sensitize properly these people. To say, though these people are there, but though you are here, what if you also can do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? In my country, I want to find that this year, a certain organization comes in with a seed to say, you farmers try this seed. They sensitize these people a new variety of seed. Well, they don't sensitize those people because those people, they've got money. They've got a lot of sales. They can control these people with the what policy. So these people, they are using, these farmers, they are used as what the trial basis. Today they are growing this crop, it flops. Then they say, no, try this now variety. So that means the poor becomes poor and poor and poor. Eventually they venture in the bush, cut trees and nonsense. I don't know if you have done research on this one. Anyway, sorry.
Well, no, thank you so much. You've raised such an important question, especially for the parts of the world where our cultures and our consciousness made our first duty a duty to care. And we didn't measure ourselves on the basis of the tools. We measured ourselves on the basis of our service to the earth and our service to community. Now, the fossil fuel age created the worship of tools, which is technology. Every society has had technology. But the technology of the dominant is made to look like the new religion you must adopt right now, as you're describing. And money and money making as the other religion. Those are the two religions, and they're two totally interconnected. A large part of our work in Navdanya, and I hope those of you who are from Africa will come. I'm going to, at some point, try and see if we cannot arrange a fellowship fund to make sure that those who need to learn how to make the transition in their countries. So the first thing we've done is create seed banks, so that seeds stay in the farmer's hand. They're adapted, they're locally adapted, farmers' knowledge of breeding is maintained, and the free exchange happens. The second is ecological systems which are built on traditional systems. After all, cultures that have farmed for 5,000 years knew how to farm. And traditional knowledge of farming is very, very important in each place. The third is the way I look at it on food sovereignty. First, you have to grow food for the earth because the earth needs food. The soil organisms need food. The second is you've got to feed your family well. In Navdanya, we say, the marketing comes second, feed yourself well. Only sell what's surplus. Third is build community through local markets and local distribution systems where you have to become more innovative, where money is not the only money is not the only mediator. Relationships are. And then You know, some places do grow coffee and some places grow cocoa. A few high-value items should be traded at a fair price. But that'll be a very small trade, not like today, where bad products are being dumped from Europe with a subsidy, but your government cannot give support to the farmer. But industrial farms in Europe can get subsidy to dump, which is a big part of the WTO. I have watched, I'm doing a new study. They've suddenly deployed these big combined harvesters. Our farms, some of our farms are smaller than this room. And they're so beautifully kept, they're like gardens. Beautiful, dense hedgerows, vegetable gardens, etc. Now, when a silly combined harvester, which is the size of this room, comes into your village, you have to chop down all the hedgerows. And all the employment goes. That's why the point you've raised is so important. Because not only did the fossil fuel age steal our minds, it stole our work. And bringing back the hands, our heads, and as Uncle said, our hearts. Our heads, our hands, our heart, whether it's in any education, we have to bring it back. We've got to educate the hands and the heads and the heart all together. And we've got to bring them into food and farming. We have to bring them into how we make homes. We have to bring them into how we make shoes, our clothing. And we should not despair because it won't be done the same way everywhere. It should not be done instantly everywhere. But wherever it can be done, let's begin now.
Yes, I think I've got the microphone. I will just give a very quick comment. So colonization, slavery are not things of the past. They're very real now, fierce, and even more intense at the moment. So I come from Senegal, and 8 countries in the west of Africa still have this colonial currency. It's called franc, CFA. So it is guaranteed by France. And to do so now, 50% of our gold reserves are, should be given to France, okay, to guarantee the value of this money. And this money is made in a very small, anonymous village in France. So in the past, we used to give 100% of our gold reserves to France so that this could be printed. And in the 70s, the World Bank and the IMF also came into the game and said we could no longer invest in education, we could no longer invest in health, we could no longer invest in our railway systems, etc., etc. And at the same time, pushing our governments, to take big loans to build dams on River Senegal. So these dams have, of course, destroyed the whole, the quality of the water, because the water has become very stagnant, and then it doesn't move, less oxygen, because it's very hot. New parasites have developed. Now all the villages living along these rivers are thirsty, though they, about 30 years ago, we would drink, this pure water. And today, the very sad news for Senegal, my country, is a lot of oil has been discovered in Senegal. And France is back in force, taking all the contracts. And one of our ministers refused to sign a contract for Total. And that night, during a meeting, this minister was sacked by the president, because the president is also, okay, we're not blaming everything on France. I think we also have a real serious problem of leadership also, because some of our leaders accept almost everything. So, and then not only France, but China, the US, they are all interested now in Senegal. All of a sudden, this small rural country has become the center of attention. And even for the last elections that took place in in February, we were so frightened, because, of the manipulations of giving money to the rebellion. And that just, the story that is happening all over Africa. Wherever there are resources, they create tensions, wars, so that when people are busy killing one another, they can just take, the resources. So this is, and then also at the same time, there's a lot of hypocrisy here in Europe. So it's like a bubble. Europe is like a bubble. And then you don't hear, you don't see. So what the multinationals in the West and the European governments do in these parts of the world, many of the citizens in Europe or in the West are not aware of this. But I mean, at the moment, really nasty things are happening all over Africa with land grabbing, with minor theft of resources, creating artificial conflicts between, ethnic groups and so on. So this is really just one side of the sad story that is already happening in Africa.
Thank you.
Before the conference, I'm atmospheric physicist, and before the conference already, I thought about agriculture to being the key if we have any technical or one-level solution to the climate problem. That impression has only been strengthened during these 2 days here, because it's the only mechanism that is able to bring carbon down where it belongs, and that is the soil. And at a time, over a time period, which would be sufficient when recalling Bill McKibben saying about 10, 15 years, that it's possible, that it's documented, that it's possible to bring a noticeable part down. The only thing is to turn this tanker around, which is the agrochemical complex. But there is the other thing where I get some hope from, and that is food is something that everybody needs. It's not like cars or other fossil fuel. We in the West think everyone needs it, but most of the population in the world cannot afford it. So that's not an issue for them. But food is an issue for everybody. So my big question is now, how do we use this key of food, of nutrition? Because then if all those who eat a lot of meat this year would commit to say, I will reduce it by 50%, and I think within a year the meat industry would collapse. So how do we do this? That is my question, because the people are like sleepwalkers. They just walk and do what governments and influencers are telling them.
Okay. So in terms of reaffirming what you're saying, our research has shown, I mentioned the 100% increase in organic matter content in our soils. It works out to about 2.2 tons per hectare. That in 10 to 20 years' time, depending on how fast you spread it, because that conversion is both in forest through the building of humus, as well as organic farms. Both farming and forestry can be this pulling down of the excess nitrogen and excess carbon dioxide. In 10 to 20 years, we can meet that 20 gigaton gap. And you remember, Christiana was showing the folded piece of cloth. It can go much faster. Because she was talking about it in terms of replacing energy sources for an industrial system. We are talking about shifting the idea of economic systems, including the idea of energy. I think the big revolution is food is energy. It either gives us energy or takes our energy. So in India, in Indian thinking, in our culture, we differentiate between 3 energies. Sattvic, which is the generative. Rajasic, which is the excitable. Tamasic, which is the heavy. Industrial food full of chemicals and the heavy factory meat and all of that is tamasic food. And I have watched more and more people make a shift to vegetarianism, make a shift to more plants, and their bodies feel lighter. Because what's circulating through us is not the energy of fossil fuels, nor the energy from the windmill. What's circulating through us is the ecological energy of nutrition. That's what's connecting us to the microbes and the plants and our gut, etc. I have watched the food. You know, when I did my book in '84 on the Green Revolution, I was about the only voice of ecological agriculture. Eating right, organic food is the fastest growing movement, which is also the reason the industrial system is doing such an attack on organic agriculture in all kinds of crazy ways. One article will say it leads to more emissions. Another will always repeat it can't feed the world. But in terms of nutrition, it's the only way it can, because nutritionally empty commodities don't feed anybody. They're causing all kinds of disease. So I think coming back to Uncle's talk this morning about life is a ceremony. Eating is the daily ceremony 3 times a day. Eating in a life-nourishing way, growing food in a life-nourishing way, which also as a side effect has a way of solving the climate problem in 20 years, is bringing ceremony and sacredness back into our world. You know, I've had an opportunity to be with the Patriarch of the Orthodox Christian Church and at the Vatican with Pope Francis. And because the sacrament is so big, I say all you have to do is bring the sacred bread true to its sacredness. Don't allow toxic bread, poison bread, exploitative bread to be part of your system. Now, can you imagine if every faith made this shift, how big it would be? Yeah? But if every home made this shift, and I have one simple principle on this, we have to turn it into a celebration of our bodies, the earth, which is connected to our bodies, the farmer and the eater, all connected. I think we have to get out of the missionary zeal of telling others what to do, including in eating. Yeah? I think we should let biodiversity thrive. Biodiversity of cultures, biodiversity of thinking, biodiversity of languages, as we heard this morning, biodiversity of plants, biodiversity of food systems. I mean, there's such an attempt to push for a uniform eating in the name of saving the planet, of lab meat and lab milk. This silly Impossible Burger is full-page news these days. Impossible Burger, lab-made meat. I said, you don't like meat? Give it up. Don't promote genetic engineering through the Impossible Burger. You know? It's all kind of backdoor entries, you know, these sly little entries. We live in true openness and true celebration. And food is where daily celebration begins.
I would...
I've had my hand up for a long time.
Huh?
I'd like to know if you have any success stories of that change of consciousness and any advice to women of how we can contribute to that.
Well, I think most places the consciousness is that we are on a sacred earth, we are spiritual beings. Our duty is to protect the earth and serve our community. So my success has been to remove that layer of fossil dust from communities. Sometimes it'll be showing that if you have earthworms and you just put a sprinkle of urea, the earthworm will start to die. Farmer sees that, he'll never again apply urea. If the consciousness of a living earth is there. With women, we have a very strong program of women for seed and food sovereignty and women's knowledge. Because wherever women don't have linear knowledge, they were never part of the industrial system. Women were left to do what didn't count in the money-making machine, which ends up being the most important work in the sustaining of life. So we've got to shift our gaze to women's work and women's knowledge. And I always say when people say we've got to empower women, I said, no, you don't have to empower women. Women are power, different kind of power. Creative power in non-violent form. We now have to turn indigenous people, which was the lesson of the opening of this morning, women, and now our children are on the streets, to understand where to go next. So, you know, I've done 3 or 4 books on the question. Women, one is Staying Alive. One is a joint book I did with a German feminist called Ecofeminism with Maria Mies. And my new book, Oneness in the 1%, is really about the peak of capitalist patriarchy in the hands of 5 billionaires, so addicted to money making that they can't get off that habit. Yeah? And we can't wait till they wake up. We have to be the change. And the changes we need, as was just mentioned, are in our everyday lives and our everyday actions. They're not grand changes, but added up, and I want to come back to Gandhi. So when Gandhi, to deal with this empire of cotton, all the destruction of livelihoods, all the slavery of indigo, he pulled out the spinning wheel. There was no spinning wheel then. They'd been finished in India. He found an 8-year-old woman and said, "Do you know how to spin?" She said, "Yeah, I have a spinning wheel in my attic." He says, "Will you bring it down and teach me?" He learned how to spin. He then gave a call to the whole country, "We'll make our own cloth. We will not be enslaved." When I started Navdanya and the seed saving in the face of this poison cartel, I call it, wanting to own the seed and own all of agriculture, I took inspiration from the spinning wheel. I said, the seed is today's spinning wheel. And Gandhi had said so beautifully, when people said, "How do you think a few pieces of wood can get you freedom?" He says, these pieces of wood, when put together in a spinning wheel and spun by the poorest of women in the smallest of hearts, is a very powerful instrument. And when every woman and every person spins their own thread and makes their own cloth, we will be free, which is exactly what happened. So if each of us saves our seeds, if each of us begins with growing our little food in a little pot, in a little garden, in a little patch, becomes part of a food community where we know how the food was grown, we support the farmers, but we also get real food and we build community, that is the climate solution. That's the solution to the crazy leaders that are getting into power. You know, I think we need to create a system that won't matter. I keep saying to, don't cry when Trump gets elected. Make him redundant. Create systems that make him redundant. Because in France, you're going to get the Le Pen next, you know, with the way things are going right now. You'll have a Le Pen there, and you'll have the alternative for Germany, but, you know. So, even to deal with all of that, we just have to reclaim our lives, but not in fear and not under siege, but in ceremony. Yeah.
Hi. Joanna. 40 years ago, I left London with many, many other people when we were all young, as the sort of green wave went out to the countryside in England. We grew our own vegetables, we reared our children organically. We agitated, we marched, we stopped factory farming. We were powerful. We supported the women at Greenham Common. We stopped cruise missiles coming to our village from Greenham Common to Longmoor Camp. Where's it gone? Where has it gone?
It's on the streets as Extinction Rebellion, as your new avatar.
At last, yes. And what I'm getting, moving on through past the upset, is tremendous optimism about the next generation and the one after. We did lots. It wasn't all for nothing, and grieving about it is a mistake. However, when I go to the supermarket, everything in a packet has got palm oil in it. You know, the whole palm oil thing is a massive scandal. All the indigenous forests of Indonesia are being very quickly destroyed. And orangutans are becoming extinct because their habitat is being destroyed for palm oil plantations. And, you know, we were powerful then. We helped to stop apartheid in South Africa by boycotting produce in the shops that was made in South Africa. Lots of people did it. It wasn't just a middle-class phenomenon. So what can we do to, you know, from the grassroots, be empowered from the grassroots.
The
to
solution to
organise.
palm oil is have your own local fats and oils, and in your local economy. I think we've got to get rid of the fossil fuels, we've got to get rid of the chemicals, we've got to get rid of the packaging, the plastic and the aluminium, which also is a way of making food anonymous because you no longer know what's in it. I was so surprised in my land of fresh food, traveling by train the other day, I pick up a piece of bread, I start to read the label. Only 45% wheat in a slice of bread, the rest is all chemicals. So it's expanded everywhere. Eating has become the most hazardous act. We've got to turn it into the highest celebration. And like I said, you see palm oil, find out a way to have local foods and fats, yeah? You see something else? I mentioned yesterday soya bean. I know there's a red light, you have your mic in your hands, we should wrap up before their program gets disrupted.
Just to conclude the optimistic journey, I live in the heart of London, right by London
You came
Bridge.
back. You went back to London.
No, I live, yes, life gets in the way.
Yeah.
Okay. One doesn't stop. I grow food in my allotment. I travel on the train for an hour outside of London to get to my allotment once a week. I come back with a trolley full of beautiful organic food. So in the heart of London, we are actually creating a very large rooftop garden just close to the Shard, which is where I live, on our council housing estate. So this is the optimistic bit. You know, it's an idea that I had 10 years ago when there was a no to it. We can't do that. People are going to throw fridges off the tower blocks. You can't do this. Hopeless. But it is going to happen now. And we've got
Wonderful.
We have University College London and Imperial College creating a project for water capture and conservation to water our garden.
Wonderful.
So it's a good project.
So if during the war, 50% of the food of England could come from the gardens, surely we can begin with that step. I call it Gardens of Hope. And at the Paris summit, we planted a garden with all the movements from around the world. And if you go to the Navdanya International website, you will find the Pledge to the Planet, which is I'll begin with a garden, but affect the whole planet. Maybe your last.
Okay. Hi everyone, I'm Seferino from South Africa, and I would just like to make a quick comment as a fellow farmer to some of the farmers that's in the room, as well as some of the consumers and members of society, because these two really coexist with one another. And one of the key challenges is literally as a new entrant to agriculture, one faces the impossible barriers to entry in terms of capital and access to land, and then also the impossible barriers to access to market. And this is, I'm slowly starting to realize that the way one needs to approach agriculture is again, we're stuck within agriculture thinking of it as silos, as a standalone industry. And even within the farmers that's currently in the system, it is quite impossible or even difficult or impossible for them to do what's right by the soil and right by the land if you go onto a piece of land which has been commoditized and you need to pay millions or thousands of rands on a bond repayment. So there's no way you can produce off the land and service this debt, basically. The only way to do it is for even meaningful, organic and good farmers. I'm seeing it everywhere in South Africa is clear the land and plant organic blueberries for export to Europe or wherever. That's literally the only way it has become viable to do organic farming. And it is seeming more and more that we need to literally combine industries, rethink why are we growing food? We're not growing food for money, we're growing it to feed people. So instead of seeing agriculture as a standalone or isolated thing, partnering it with a school. So you're feeding the school and hence you building a connection and you immediately have a market. Linking it to hospitals or to medicine because now food and medicine link into and you have a market. This is almost a path that we as farmers need to think if we want to be successful as farmers. And this is also what consumers and the general public at large needs to keep in mind in a consciousness of how we approach agriculture if we wanted to succeed. Because as is, it is basically impossible to succeed as a farmer. And And then just something else to some of the people that have been asking what we can do in terms of, a simple practical thing, and this is something that I've practiced quite recently, was just being conscious of what you're doing. So when you're eating your food, and I'm listening to what you're saying, is even just for one meal a day, I've started literally switching off the TV, the phone, and even closing my eyes while I'm eating, because we know our bodies is part of the system, and I've been doing it for a while now, and literally you'll eat something as simple as a salad and you can feel the life force within it, and it's not even much. You feel this nourishment, and a simple act like that of just connecting wherever you are, a simple deed like that. Yes, thank you.
So, to wrap up, if the fossil age said nature is dead, people are stupid, just cogs in a machine, we are at the moment of addressing not just climate change, but all the multiple dead ends we face as human beings and the harm we are doing to the earth and other species, is to first of all recognize the creativity that is inherent in life and the earth. And that's why we talk of agriculture as co-creation with the earth, not production. Yeah? And for the link that you were asking, organic farmers won't survive on their own, nor will people who don't grow food ever get access to good food without joining the two. And that's why we don't use the word consumer in Navdanya. The word consumption was the Middle Ages word for tuberculosis. And in a way, the planet has TB right now. We've given her TB. She's got a problem of breathing. We talk of them as co-producers with consciousness. You are aware of the impact of your eating on the insect, on the soil, on the farmer, on your health, on the climate. That consciousness is not about climate out there. It is a consciousness of every act, every day, that makes you connected to the larger world. Thank you. That red light is very strong. Go ahead. Without the mic. They're being generous. They're giving you a mic. Allowed?
Thank you. Perfect. I think I have a question back to the animals. If we look at regenerative agriculture as one of the, most solution that is most talked about at the moment, it mentions livestock management as one of the most effective ways. Like, it's not food gardens or food forests that give food to the local communities. They're also important, but when it comes to sequestering carbon or nitrogen, as you've mentioned, isn't it the livestock that is the most important, that we need to scale up? If we need to scale up this operation and go to numbers and use these practical and technical terms in order to tackle this challenge, I guess the question is going to, don't you find these signs like vegan, gonna save the world signs a little bit misleading, in a way that there's no conversation about vegans managing livestock? It's more like hands off the animals, but we still need them in this important
mission. Which is why I differentiated from factory farming is the accurate word that was created. And somehow there's a whole shift in inaccurate language from factory farming to animal agriculture. Now, our farm is a fossil fuel-free farm. I grew up with cows and calves. My office of Research Foundation is the cow shed my mother left me. And she'd first go talk to the calves. She'd first give them milk. And we got leftovers. We got leftover love, we got leftover milk, no guilt complex. On the farm, very consciously, if you've got to keep fossil fuels out, you work as co-partners with bullocks. Prince Charles had come to our farm and was so impressed. He said, I'm going to bring horses back to Highgrove. Yeah? Now, if you if work is not a curse for you, but is a generation of energy, and the fossil fuel age said work is the worst thing you can do. Use your body, use your hands is the worst thing you can do. We get out of that trap. Then when we work, and we work with the earth, and we sow a seed, and we harvest, we are actually in the process of generating life. When we plow with 2 bullocks, they're our partners. They're not objects. There are only 2 people on our farm with whom the bullocks will move. They're so self-opinionated. They will not allow someone they don't like to be behind them. So I think if we've got to recognize that all life is sentient, plants are sentient, we've got to give them respect. Animals are sentient, we've got to give them respect. But not only is all life sentient, but all life is interconnected, and partnership in a non-violent production system is the only way to get out of the fossil fuel age and the climate trap. Non-violence is the key. Respect and reverence is the key, and partnership is the key. No system of production can work with one element. The trees are needed, the forests are needed, the animals are needed for the rotation of, especially in dry areas. In wet areas, it's fine, you don't need livestock. But you look in Africa or you look in India, the drier the region, the more the livestock. Because livestock distribute their eating needs, and they distribute their fertilizing. And in the process, the systems become sustainable. Pastoralism is something so important for dry lands. Yeah? And we have to look at the culture of pastoralism and the love for the camel among the camel herders of the Rajasthan desert or the sub-Saharan Africa. So the issue is not whether you are with animals or livestock are in the farming system, but how you treat them. And when I said we can't be fundamentalists and force others, you see, very often people who feel, I've got the miracle condition. Now I'm going to hit you on the head and force you to think like me and be like me. It's violent. It's an extremely violent behavior, given the diversity of cultures, diversity of foods, diversity of eating habits, and the diversity of the needs of places. Greenland, he needs to hunt. Amazon, they need to hunt. We had organized a rainforest movement. This is way back in the early 90s, before the Earth Summit. And big rainforest movement, Arctic to the Amazon, all very proud, we are saving the rainforest. Serving vegetarian food. The Amazonian Indians and the Arctic Eskimos walked right out. This is not food for us. Issue is the test is violence. Yeah? The test is objectification. The test is the end of compassion. Therefore, the test is relationship. And we have to get out of this objectified way of factory thinking. Yeah? Everything has to be exactly like I opinionate about it, in ignorance. I'm not going to go to Rajasthan and tell them not to drink the camel milk. People are coming in hordes to India because now they found camel milk is very good for autism. They bring their kids for 3 months to drink camel milk for treatment to autism. So I think plurality, generosity, non-violence, compassion of a deep kind, and educate yourself about the richness of biodiversity on this planet and the cultural diversity of so much. Just this morning, the languages. Didn't it blow your mind? 80 languages, 30 languages, 50 languages. Let's celebrate ceremony. Eating has to be a ceremony.
Sorry about that.